Hey guys, Dr. Blackman here. We're going to go over this sagittal head model, and we're just specifically looking at the respiratory structures, okay, for the respiratory lab. Okay, so as with all of these, follow along with me in your lab student handouts, okay? We could spend all day talking about the parts of the brain and so forth, but we're going to focus on respiratory structures. So this area here, right, your nasal cavity, okay? So that provides a lot of space for air to be filtered, warmed, moistened before it gets down into the lungs, okay? So nasal cavity. This is called the palate, right? The palate, so the white is the hard palate, the yellow and red there is the soft palate. There's the uvula, a little punching bag in the back of the throat, okay? We'll talk a lot more about the palate when we get to the digestive system, but that palate separates the nasal cavity from the oral cavity, with the tongue there, okay? So this is not on your lab student handout, but sinuses, those are clinically relevant because a lot of us have sinusitis, right? There's a sinus there, there's a sinus there, okay? The other name for the throat is the pharynx, okay? And the pharynx is here. And as you can see, it's a common passageway for both air coming this way, right, and food coming this way. So the other name for the throat is the pharynx, so you need to know the three regions. So this region here behind the nasal cavity, this region here would be the nasopharynx, okay? Then this part of the pharynx here, posterior to the oral cavity, is the oropharynx, O-R-O, not ortho. A lot of students will say orthopharynx sometimes. It's oropharynx, okay? And then here, because it's the larynx, this is the laryngopharynx, okay? Some people say laryngopharynx, some people say laryngopharynx. I've heard it pronounced both ways by people who know what they're talking about, okay? So those are the three parts of the pharynx. Again, I mentioned this region here, right? That's the larynx, okay? So if you have inflammation there, you have laryngitis, right? You get a very raspy, hoarse voice when you try to speak, okay? So the different structures that make up the larynx are the following, okay? This little flap-like structure is called the epiglottis, okay? And when you swallow, you want food and drink to go this way, right, into your esophagus and down into your stomach. You do not want it to go this way, down into your trachea and into the lungs. That's called aspiration. That's bad. That can give you a really bad pneumonia, okay? So when you swallow, that epiglottis moves over the top of the trachea to protect it from food and drink entering the trachea. Okay, so again, epiglottis, right? This opening here is the glottis, okay, through which air travels, okay, glottis. So the epiglottis covers the glottis when you eat or drink, okay? So glottis is the opening. This structure here, and there's better ways to show this, but on this model, this structure here, just inferior to the glottis, those are the true vocal cords, okay? Those are responsible for allowing us to speak, okay? So true vocal cords. These vocal cords here that are on top of the glottis here, superior to the glottis, those are called the false vocal cords, okay? Those don't play a role in speech production. Those allow you to close off the glottis when you're holding your breath, let's say, okay? So again, larynx is the region. Here's the trachea down here. Don't get that confused with the esophagus. That's part of the digestive system, okay? Another couple of structures that you're responsible for, that bone that the tongue is connected to, that's the hyoid bone, okay? There's the thyroid cartilage. There's the cricoid cartilage, C-R-I-C-O-I-D, okay? If you've ever heard of a cricothyroidotomy, right, that's to establish an emergency airway. Sometimes you'll see that in movies, right? What they do is make a hole right here between the thyroid cartilage and the cricoid cartilage. They make an emergency airway there into the trachea so that you can bypass an obstruction, right? There's, let's say, a pork chop that's become lodged right there, okay? So I think those are all the structures that you're responsible for. Let me look at my list real quick and make sure that all of the structures are covered, and there are a couple of structures that we didn't do. So going back to the nasal cavity, we mentioned that you need a lot of surface area there to filter, to warm, to humidify the air. So these bony protrusions that stick out and kind of look like conch shells, right? Those are called the conchi, okay? The singular of that is concha, plural is conchi, okay? And there's a superior one, a middle one, and a inferior one. So superior concha, some people say superior nasal concha if you want to be that specific. So superior nasal concha, middle nasal concha, inferior nasal concha. The passageways through which air travels, that's a meatus, M-E-A-T-U-S. So there's the superior meatus, and again, some people say superior nasal meatus. There would be the middle meatus, and then between the inferior nasal concha and the palate, that would be the inferior meatus. Okay, and again, that pattern there allows you to have a lot of surface area in the nasal cavity so that it can perform its functions. Okay, one interesting thing real quick too, the opening here, that's the opening of the eustachian tube or the auditory tube that goes to the inner and middle ear. So you can imagine if a virus and a bacteria works its way in there, it can go behind the tympanic membrane in the ear and give you what's called an otitis media. Right? A lot of children get that as an ear infection. That's how those pathogens can access the structures of the ear. It's just something interesting to point out. So I think it's all the structures. Keep working hard, guys, and best of luck to you.